Welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to learn how we can use HTML loader to dynamically copy an HTML file and inject our bundles automatically into it, and how we may use a file loader to do the same for images basically. This video builds up on this video where we already set up a basic Webpack 2 project, allowing us to compile ES6 code to JavaScript code with Babel and SCSS code to CSS code. You can find a link in the video description where you can get the starting code for this project I'm using here. So with that, let's dive into that project here. And what you can see is I opened it in the web storm, and that's the basic project we're starting with, CSS and JavaScript code here, our Webpack config file, as mentioned before, making sure that we compile the ES6 code and SCSS code, and that is everything for now. That's nice, but as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I now want to tweak this setup and improve it a little bit more. One thing I don't like is we have the index.html file sitting in the root directory here. It kind of would make more sense to put it into the source directory to indicate that we of course may change this file too, so that we are able to, well, change it and then copy it to the dist folder, so that we do have it in our distribution folder too, so that in the end also our dist folder contains everything we need to deploy. Right now, if we run npm run build prod to be precise, you will notice that we get a dist folder, but in this dist folder we actually only have the bundle JavaScript file and the main CSS file, and the index.html file is not inside that folder. So that is kind of counterintuitive. One other thing I set up right now is I include the imports for script and CSS manually in the index.html file. It would be nice to have one single workflow where this is done automatically. And finally, if we were to use images and we stored these images in the source folder, that also would not work because we don't copy the image file over to the dist folder or something like that. So a couple of things we can improve, and I will start improving that right now. And I want to start by fetching an image so that we can see that this image copying and implementation actually works. So I will simply search for Webpack here, since that sounds like a good image for this case. And I will have a look at the PNGs here because I want to show how to include such a PNG file. And why don't we simply take this one here? So I will simply save this image, and of course you are free to choose any other image. I will save it in the folder where I have this project we're working on right now. And there in the source folder, I create a new image folder, and here I will insert the Webpack logo.php file, a PNG file. So with that, we added this to our project. We can find it here in the image folder. Now, the next step is I will move the index.html file into the source folder, because that's the other thing we wanted to do, to have that all in one folder, and in the end also have it all in the dist folder. And therefore, in this index.html file, and I want to include this image. So I will add a div below my heading here, where I'll add an image tag, and I simply want to point to the image folder, and then the Webpack logo PNG file, and give it some alt text of Webpack maybe. So that's my index.html file setup. Well, almost. I also want to remove the script and the CSS imports, because that's the other part I mentioned. I want to include these dynamically so that we don't have to hard code it into here. With that, the index.html file is prepared. We got an image, but of course the workflow is not at all in a state to handle this. So let's add some new loaders to enhance our Webpack configuration. If we have a look at our package.json file here, we see we already got a couple of loaders, but we'll need some new ones. So I will use npm install --save dev again to save them as development dependencies and store them as such in the package.json file. And the loaders or packages I want to install are the HTML loader for the HTML file, the HTML Webpack plugin, which will then create or recreate that HTML file based on the one we're using as a source. So it will basically not just copy it, it will create a new one, but use the old one as a template, you could say. Then the file loader to also copy some files, like images in our case here. And for now, that's everything. I will add something else later in this video though. So these are the 3 new loaders, or 2 loaders, 1 plugin I want to add. And with that, I can go to my Webpack config and adjust that. So in there, I'll simply start in the rules section and I'll add a new rule where I want to test for it being an HTML file. So just as you learned it, I'll test for the extension with this regular expression. Then I'm going to use something, and that something is an array. However, I only have one loader, and that's just the HTML loader, so I can use that shortcut of putting just a string into this array, like I do here. So that already is the HTML loader, all we need for that. Let's work on the loader for the images next. That's another JavaScript object in our rules array. Here, I want to test for it being an image. And of course, you can have multiple formats. I want to allow two formats here. And the regular expression for that uses these parentheses to have a or condition in between, so to say. So here I will check if it's a .jpeg or, with a pipe symbol, a .png file. These file types can now be handled by this rule. And there I will use my array, of course. I will add my loader. And here I want to add some options. That's why I'm using the object notation. The loader is the file loader, but I also want to define something about where it should get stored and how it should be named. So I'll add my options object to this loader. And now the file loader takes a couple of options. And as always, you can learn more about these options on the official page. Simply Google for Webpack file loader and you will find the official GitHub page with the documentation. So here in options, I want to define the name. By default, it would give it some hash. So the normal file name you used before would be replaced by some random hash. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that, but I want to keep the original name. So I will simply use in squared brackets name, which is a variable, which is recognized by file loader and means, okay, keep the old name. Then dot, and then in squared brackets 2, ext. And you might be able to guess what that means. However, it should be enclosed in single quotation marks, that whole expression. And that simply means keep the original name and extension. And why do we need to specify this? As mentioned, because by default, file loader would use this random hash. And you can also configure some other things about it. And therefore, this is what I want to use as a configuration here to simply copy the file, you could say. So that's the name. I also want to tell it where to output it to with the output path, which also takes a string. By default, it would just shove it into our output folder, which is our dist folder here. Now, that is not what I want here. I want to have it in a subfolder. And that again is just a personal preference. You can leave it in the dist folder. You can have all your assets in the dist folder in the end, all your deployment artifacts. Here, however, as mentioned, I want to have it in the image folder. So I will put image / here as an output path. And I'll do the same for the public path. The last option I want to set that also will be image to inform it where this now is. So in output path, we tell it copy it into the image folder, but it will also automatically update our HTML file with the correct new place of this. And we need to set this to public path to still, well, put image / and then the name of the image into the index.html file. It would not do that otherwise. So output path is for copying, the other one is for, well, keeping the correct reference in the places where we use this image. So with that, the image loader is prepared. The HTML loader is prepared, but the HTML loader is only one part of, well, what we need to set up. With that, we basically extract any HTML it finds, so in the HTML file in this case, and we'll store it as text, and that isn't too useful for us. We need to use another tool, which we already installed. We need to use the HTML Webpack plugin. This is a plugin which will actually create a brand new HTML file, but we can tell it that it should do so based on some template. And what's a good template for an HTML file? Well, besides other supported options like handlebars or EJS, HTML, of course. And that is just what we store with the HTML loader. So all we need to do now is we need to import this plugin, so the HTML Webpack plugin, which we require from the package we just added, HTML Webpack plugin. And then in the plugins array at the bottom of our config, I simply instantiate this plugin with new HTML Webpack plugin. And here, I need to pass a JavaScript object where I configure it. You don't have to do so. in that case, if you pass no configuration, it would create a new index.html file by default, give it some dummy title, and that's important, automatically inject all your bundles you create, so the main.css file and the bundle.js file, so it would do that. It will still do that if we add a tiny configuration, the template configuration, which will still create an index.html file, so that is the name it will use, which will still inject our bundles, so scripts at the end of the body section and CSS code in the head section, but which will, in opposite to the usage without a configuration, not pre-fill this index.html file with some dummy text, but instead take our HTML dummy. So therefore here I can simply say the template should be our source index.html file. And this is then of course parsed by the HTML loader, which fetches the HTML text, which again is a valid template for the HTML file we're creating with this plugin. And with that, everything will work. So by pointing to source index.html, we make sure that we use that for the index.html file, which gets created in the dist folder. And that already is a major step of what we need to set up. Now we're almost done. One thing I need to adjust though is the public path. Because keep in mind, right now, or not right now, the last time we configured this, the index.html file was in the root folder. So telling Webpack that the path of our assets is in the dist folder was correct. That's not the case anymore. Now the index.html file will sit in the dist folder too. So we can simply remove this, comment it out for example, the public path. Well, and with this in place, if we now run npm run build to start the Webpack development server, let's see, that looks all right here, I guess, no errors. So if we now visit localhost 8080, that looks good, we see the image, and the rest is also still working here, so that's all looking great. Let's also try our development build, npm run build prod, to create the dist folder. And there we see we got an image folder with our Webpack file, and in the index.html file we can see that it correctly points to that folder here. We also see that it injected our bundle.js script import and the main.css import. So this would now all be prepared to be deployed. And keep in mind, we didn't add this here in the source folder. This was indeed injected. You can't find the script or CSS import in here. So that's working. One thing which I don't like is that this dist folder is always there. And if we were to change something, rename the created JavaScript bundle, the old bundle would not get removed because it would constantly only add new files to this dist folder. So it would be nice if we could entirely remove the dist folder before we start each build process, so to say, so that we build a completely new dist folder whenever we run npm run build prod. Turns out we can do that rather easily. All I need to do is install one additional new plugin. So with npm install --save dev, I'll also store it in the package.json file, and it's called clean Webpack plugin. And there are other options of cleaning the dist folder. You could use operating system commands in the package.json file in the script. You could use other packages. I'm going to go with that plugin though. So with that installed, I can go to my Webpack config file. I'll need to import it here. So the clean Webpack plugin, which I also require from the package we just installed, clean Webpack plugin. Well, and then all I have to do is go to the bottom, add it here in the plugins array, new clean Webpack plugin, position doesn't matter, and there I need to pass an array of all the folders I want to clean. And that takes some strings. I only want to remove one folder, and that's the dist folder. And as always, Google this plugin to find more about the available options and how you may configure it. So with that in place, if I now run npm run build again, build prod, you see the dist folder is not there right now. But if I reload this directory structure, you see it was recreated. So now it will remove the dist folder before creating a new one. And that already is the finished workflow. That already is everything I wanted to show you: how to copy images, how to copy the HTML file, and how to dynamically inject the imports into the HTML file as well as clean up the dist folder when building the project. I hope this was useful and hopefully see you in other videos too. Have a great time. Bye.